We've been having poltergeist activity here, and have even caught strange images on our cameras. My name is Vanessa, and I've been the manager at this specific location for 4 years this month. For confidentiality, I will not be disclosing the branch or location of this hotel. I'm sharing my story in hopes that someone may have information or possible theories on what is happening. Now, I've worked in the hotel industry for over 15 years, and never once have I encountered anything remotely close to what's been going on here. It all started about a year ago, when one of our guests, we'll call her Sarah, had come to the front desk complaining about strange noises coming from the room next to hers. At first, I thought she was just hearing things because she was tired, but then other guests began coming to the front desk with very similar complaints. I would be in my office, and I would hear what sounded like loud, hysterical crying or even screaming, only to pull up that nobody was even in those rooms at all. When going to investigate, they were completely empty, void of any life or activity. I would go and check, and nobody would be in there. I would hear voices, laughter, and sometimes even sobbing coming from these empty rooms while outside. And lately, in the past 3 or 4 months, since about June or May, things have been getting really weird. Guests have been complaining about being disturbed in the middle of the night by a strange apparition, or noises, or even objects being moved around. I've even had my own personal experiences with this so-called poltergeist activity. I was in my office late one night, working on some paperwork, when I heard a noise coming down the hallway. After getting up to investigate, I saw a lamp go crashing to the ground. It was with so much force, like something or someone had thrown it across the hall. Only problem is, it was around 11:45 p.m. I was the only one on shift, and this is back in the employee area. It made no sense. I've also seen doors slamming shut on their own and things moving around in the rooms when there's nobody there. It's been really creepy, and I hate to say it, but I feel like this place is starting to feel haunted. I know it sounds so absurd, but the issues we've been having are ongoing. Even the other night, I was working another late shift, and I received a call from the front desk. The man was screaming and sounded absolutely terrified. His claim was that somebody was in his room with him and trying to strangle him. In the background, I could hear furniture crashing around and things being thrown against the walls. I could hear the man screaming for his life. Security and the police were called to go and investigate his room. By the time we all rushed up there, the man flew out of the room, cowering. Upon entry, the room had been completely trashed. It looked like a tornado had gone through. The man was babbling about how something had been trying to kill him and how it had almost succeeded. He was so shaken up that we had to call an ambulance. Needless to say, he checked out the following morning, and we have not seen or heard from him. He was supposed to call us back and follow up. His story was that this black shadow appeared in the room with him and attempted to strangle him violently. He said it was like nothing he'd ever seen or experienced before, and that it felt pure evil. Now, he's also a very religious man, and he stands firm that whatever had attacked him was a demon assigned to him from the pits of hell. Now, needless to say, this whole incident has left me completely shaken and without any answers. And this has happened to me on several occasions, but as I said, I'll be in my office working on paperwork or something, and I suddenly hear my name being whispered to me from down the hall, but it sounds different. I don't know how to describe it. Like, it sounds distorted, like it's coming through an old AM radio, I guess would be the best way to explain it. Anyway, it gives me the creeps every time. And I've also had experiences where I'll be in a room and I feel like someone is either behind me or watching me from afar, But again, it's the same situation. There is no one around. Or if I'm with an employee, well, they're clearly not looking at me. And I know I'm not paranoid. Look, long story short, it's really unnerving, and it's starting to make me feel uncomfortable being here. I don't know what to do or where to turn, and I'm starting to feel like I'm going crazy. Now, has anyone else experienced anything like this? Is there any advice on how to deal with a possible haunting? I would really appreciate any input. Thank you for your understanding. In September of 2006, I moved into my grandfather's house shortly after he had passed away. It was close to my college and work at the time, so it was perfect. I never imagined all the events that would take place in this very house. To give you a quick background on my grandfather, he was a very sweet, kind, and gentle soul. Never hurt a fly, but in his later years, he got dementia pretty bad, and his health eventually began to decline more and more. Next thing you know, he was bedridden when he eventually passed away at the end of August in 2006. He only ever had 2 grandchildren. The other I wasn't very close with, and he was off in the military, stationed in Germany at this time. So moving into the house wasn't exactly an option for him, but for me, it made perfect sense. Fortunately, I loved his house, or at least I loved visiting him when he had his house, and my college was only about 15 minutes away, and my work about 25 minutes. It definitely beat the hour-plus commute when I lived in my old apartment. While I'd like to sit here and tell you that everything went great, it did not. Living in that house left me traumatized, and here's exactly why. Not even a week after I moved in, strange things began to take place all around the home. Keep in mind that before this, I never even once entertained the idea of ghosts. I'd like to consider myself agnostic. Not exactly atheist, but I guess you can consider me open to the idea of God or the afterlife. But never once did I ever think ghosts or spirits were a real thing. I thought it was just something you used to scare people or entertainment in movies. I remember the first night vividly. Not the first night there, but the first night I remember something happening. I was lying in my bedroom upstairs, the same room my grandfather used to be in, and I heard this strange crash coming from downstairs. Thinking somebody had just broken into the house, I jump up out of bed, run out the door, down the stairs to see nothing wrong at all. Nothing misplaced, nothing had fallen, but yet there was a strange feeling in the home. It's hard for me to describe, but it just felt like I wasn't alone. I know, you can call me paranoid, call me stupid, I don't care. That's just what I sensed. I did my best to ignore it because I had school the next day, and if I remember correctly, I actually had an exam. Anyway, I went back to bed, things were fine. I get back the following day, and the furniture in the house is moved around, and a few things are knocked over. I thought that was strange, considering no one is sharing the house with me. I'm the only person that has the key, and he doesn't really have any neighbors. So, the best that I could. Fortunately, I was going to be out of the house that night, because I had picked up an extra shift for a little bit of extra money. So, I was gone all that evening, returning home about 10:30 p.m. Now, this is the night where things really took a turn. The second I walk in the home, at about 10:30 after getting off work, I noticed the house felt different. It felt eerie, it didn't feel right, it didn't feel warm and inviting. It felt like I shouldn't be there. I don't recall having the feeling that I was watched or that I was being paranoid, it just felt like there was something wrong. Maybe it was my senses going off, maybe it was my gut instinct. Either way, I tried my best to push it down, ignore it because I had school the following morning. I did not have time for this nonsense. So I simply went upstairs, got ready for bed, laid down, and as I'm sitting there in my bed, trying my best to shut my brain off to go to sleep, I hear something very heavy slowly creak up the stairs. Pum, pum, pum. And now my eyes are shooting open and I feel like my stomach is in the back of my throat because now I can audibly hear someone is coming up the stairs towards my bedroom. And my bedroom is the only room upstairs other than a spare bedroom and the bathroom further down the hall. I figured that somebody had broken into the house, was hiding the whole time I was gone, and was waiting to take me out. I sat there, turned to face the doorway, and grabbed my pocket knife, although I don't know what good that would have done, but having a weapon is better than none, and I waited. And I could hear the footsteps get closer. Pum. Pum. The footsteps get right up to outside the door and stop. And then I begin to hear this almost raspy breathing, reminiscent of a heavy smoker who smoked his whole life, and it was a wheezing kind of breath. Like it was a struggle for this person to breathe. And in my entire body, in my being, in my inner core, I knew this is the end of my life. I'm done. There's no way that I'm going to be able to fight this person off. I was too overcome with fear. I was petrified. I was gripping my pocket knife so tight, just waiting for whoever it was to show themselves. But they never did. Instantly, not even 5 seconds later, I feel this gust of air and what I can only describe as a force come into the room. You could feel the air blow against you. It was frigid. And within a second, maybe not even, I felt as if something very heavy was restraining my wrists and my ankles down on the bed so that I could not move. And I felt something very heavy begin to climb on top of me. That's probably the best way I can describe what was going on. I began screaming for help, screaming out of fear and panic, and whatever was on top of me, some invisible assailant, began speaking to me in this almost evil voice. Let me try to describe it to you the best I possibly can. It was almost identical to what you would imagine a demon's voice to be in a Hollywood movie. It was deep, but it was also very strained and very raspy, very guttural. But at the same time, it wasn't loud. It was like it was whispering. And I heard the words clear as day, this voice being only no more than 6 inches away from my face, tell me this exactly. Your grandfather is in hell. And the next second, I feel this piercing, searing pain down my arms and down my neck. And then it lets go. I jump up out of bed. I am screaming. I am hysterical. I go running down the stairs, grab the keys, and I book it over to a friend's house who lives about 12 minutes away, really close by. I'm calling him on the phone, driving over there. I'm waking him up. He has no idea what's going on. He doesn't understand why I am hysterical, and so I have to calm myself down and explain to him exactly what happened. He's trying to calm me down over the phone. I pull up to his house. I go inside. I am just a wreck. And after an hour or two of talking to me, yes, he's that good of a friend that he would stay up with me on a school night to help calm me down, put me in a good mindset, and allow me to crash on his couch. Well, long story short, sparing you all the monotonous details, I was able to at least get some sleep that night. But the following morning, I had these red marks on my neck and down my arms, as if somebody had taken a hot poker and burned me and drug it against my skin. This hurt for the next probably 3 to 4 days looking back. I couldn't explain it. My friend couldn't explain it. We both saw it. Fortunately, I had my backpack and all my school stuff in the car, so I didn't exactly need to go back to the house for anything that morning. So I went to school, and then I had my shift right after my classes, so I didn't actually end up going back to that house till that same evening after dark. You could imagine my anticipation of going back there. Anxiety levels were skyrocketing just at the thought of stepping back in that house, but I knew I had to. Upon returning home, the entire house felt different again, but this time in a good way. It felt like there was this loving, calming, warm presence in the home, much the same way my grandfather made me feel when he was alive. Very warm, very loving, very inviting. And for the first time in the last few days, I felt very comfortable, very at home. like I was more than invited, that I was wanted. So I tried my best to lay on the couch and try to fall asleep. I could have sworn that night, sometime in the morning, I woke up to my grandfather sitting next to me, putting his hand on my shoulder, telling me in the most heartfelt manner, "I love you, Dylan. Everything is going to be okay." He smiled at me and then just seemed to vanish into this mist like vapor in front of me. And like that, he was gone. I fell asleep shortly after that, almost in a forced sense, if that makes any sense at all. It was like my body was just overcome with exhaustion and I could not keep myself awake. I've never slept so hard in my life. I don't know if his spirit stayed behind to calm me or protect me from whatever evil entity or demon or whatever you want to call it that had attacked me the night prior, but I felt like his presence had stuck around because the months after all of this, I would come home during the evenings and I would occasionally feel that same warm, inviting, loving presence. And I just knew deep down, that was my grandfather sticking it out for me, staying here on Earth, trying to protect me of whatever evil was in that house. And I stayed in that house till March of the following year in 2007, when my aunt wanted to move in because she was having a really nasty divorce with her husband at the time. And me and my buddy, the one who let me stay over at his house, we actually ended up roommating together for a while after this. So yeah, that's my story. Make of it what you will, but I truly believe that my grandfather was there to protect me against whatever that thing was. In the summer of 2007, I worked at Camp Lost Isle, a small island off the coast of northern Michigan. It was my job to run the kids program, which involved taking kids out on the wilderness adventures for the day or even leading them in arts and crafts. Now, that summer, I had a couple of kids talk to me about seeing what they described was a monster, plain and simple. This wasn't exactly uncommon. At that camp, the woods were often very mysterious and scary to young children. So it was not surprising that there had been talks of ghosts and monsters and other weird things that kids usually fear. I was always skeptical about these stories for the same reasons adults tell children not to talk to strangers, because adults don't believe in ghosts or monsters. But what's interesting is how insistent these children were. They had told me over and over again they'd seen a monster with yellow eyes, with a long face, and what they were clearly describing was a snout. Now, I didn't believe them at first, but I noticed other kids started talking about this same monster using the exact same descriptions. And soon, that monster was all anybody was talking about. In fact, one kid said he had seen it during an adventure in the woods. Another had said she had seen it from her cabin window. At that moment, I started to believe that maybe they are seeing something, but it certainly couldn't be what they're describing. Perhaps they're just letting their imagination run wild, and they're simply misidentifying maybe a large black bear. I just didn't know how real until one night I was lying in my bunk, and I heard something heavy on the roof of the cabin behind me. It was extremely loud, and it sounded like a person banging around on a tin roof. I jumped on my bed, ran outside. Looking up, I could not see anything. So, after a couple of minutes, I gave up going back inside. Now, the next night, I heard the exact same thing. After that, I began to get scared, because now something strange is happening. I eventually confronted one of the camp counselors about these strange things going on and the fact that all the kids were now talking about this. I asked her if she'd seen anything weird, and she told me no. She explained that the kids had just made this whole thing up to deal with the fear of being away from home. It made sense, but it did not satisfy me. At that moment, I decided to investigate this little monster of my very own. I followed the same path the kids had been taking when they went to the bathroom at night, the same source where many stories had originated from. The trail led through the woods and eventually to the top of a small hill. I waited until it was late at night and walked out there myself. There was nothing but forest all around me. Everybody at this time was asleep, and it was pretty dark. I walked around to the other side, through the woods, and I was not exactly sure where I was going. Foolish in hindsight, but I decided to keep walking. Eventually, I found myself at the base of the hill on the other side, standing at the edge of the tree line. Now, I was really starting to feel like I had no idea where I was, and I felt like I was being pulled further into the woods, if this makes sense. It's like as if something inside of me was compelling me to go further, as if some mysterious force was beckoning me further. It was like a combination of a roar and a whisper that I suddenly heard behind me. I turned around and shocked to see this entity. It was standing almost next to me, staring into me and at me. And the next thing that I remember is that I blacked out. When I woke up, it was the morning time, and I was sitting on a log. I felt like the whole thing was this hazy dream, but I knew that I was not dreaming. I looked around, and I was still in the woods like I had been the night before. It was early. The sun was just cracking over the horizon. I knew everybody would still be asleep for a little while longer. I walked back to camp confused and dazed. I told nobody about what happened. This event stayed in my mind for the next few days. I even had trouble sleeping. Everything just felt so different. It's hard to explain. I mean, even days and months after the incident had occurred, I never felt quite the same. Like something inside of me changed that night. The kids still kept talking about seeing this monster, and a couple of weeks later, everybody began using the term Wendigo. So I'll leave it up to you to decide. Was this just some massive nightmare, hallucination, or did we all have a genuine Wendigo sighting?